As Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region enters the third week, overwhelming Russian border defenses, and taking hundreds of soldiers captive. Key bridges have been coming under attack. Over 4 days, 3 bridges in the Kursk region were either destroyed or damaged, all with US-made HIMARS. Analysts say these were part of critical supply lines for Russian troops in the Donetsk region. Moreover, 13 NATO nations have now permitted Ukraine to use Western weapons such as tanks, artillery systems, and infantry fighting vehicles inside Russia. Stay tuned to understand what is happening in Kursk and Donetsk region. Russian troops are closing in on the strategic eastern Ukrainian town of Pokrovsk, one of Ukraine's main defensive strongholds in the Donetsk region. The capture of the city would bring Russia a step closer to its long-held goal of seizing the entire Donetsk region, much of which it already controls. Pokrovsk, a city with a pre-war population of about 60,000, sits on a key road linking several cities that form a defensive arc protecting the part of Donetsk that is still held by Ukraine. Casting doubts on Ukraine's hopes that its new offensive into western Russia will prompt Moscow to scale back its attacks elsewhere on the battlefield. Moscow has reportedly started using glide bombs in a defensive position. This marks a shift in strategy, as these munitions were previously employed for strikes deep within Ukrainian territory. Now the tide has turned. Russia is using them to bombard its own territory in an attempt to repel the advancing Ukrainian forces. Initially, Russia deployed the smaller Fab 500, now unleashed the massive 3,000 kilograms massive Fab 3000 launched from advanced Su-34 supersonic fighter bombers. There have been many events, economic sanctions imposed on Russia by the West, and initial Ukrainian successes on the battlefield, that have made people think Putin might need to change course. But he hasn't. No doubt, the move has boosted Ukrainian spirits, during a year in which Russia has made steady gains on the battlefield. Oleksandr Syrskyi, Ukraine's commander-in-chief, claimed Kyiv's forces controlled about 1,263 square kilometers, and 93 settlements in Russia's Kursk region, 3 weeks into the offensive. That's almost as much land as Russia has advanced upon in Ukraine so far this year, according to analysts. Meanwhile, Putin's next moves remain uncertain, as does the effect this attack will have on the Russian public's perceptions of the war, which is now in its 3rd year. Some are questioning why Kyiv is devoting so many resources to taking Russian land, rather than defending its own. Furthermore, Ukraine confirmed on 21st. 3 most important bridges on the Seine River in Blushkovo, Svanoy, and Karis. Destroy one completely and damage the other 2. By targeting the bridges, Ukraine was cutting off logistical supplies to Russian forces deployed in Donetsk and eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian media and Russian military bloggers were reporting that the destruction of the 3 bridges had left about 80 Russian villages in the area without road access. Russia was reportedly building floating pontoon bridges to transfer its forces, and was attempting to evacuate civilians on small boats. However, the pontoon bridges are considerably less resilient to rocket and air strikes. Russia wants control of all parts of Donetsk and neighboring Luhansk, which together make up the Donbas industrial region. By cutting those bridges, it makes it very difficult for the Russians to send munition supplies to those forces. The Ukrainians want to weaken the capability of those forces, so they can eventually go back on the counteroffensive in eastern Ukraine. While the US officials added that Ukraine had drawn on its reserves for its cross-border offensive, meaning it could be more difficult for Kyiv to bolster its troops on the eastern front. It might be a powerful bargaining chip for future peace talks or pullback to reinforce a key city inside Ukraine. Zelensky has also said that one of the goals of the offensive was to create a buffer zone to protect Ukraine's Sumy region by pushing Russian forces back from the border, limiting Moscow's ability to shell the area. Some people living in Sumy region villages close to the border said they indeed feel safer now. Others said they are more nervous that the increased Ukrainian military presence in the area could lead to more missile strikes. Russia has always been very clear that the use of foreign weapon systems on Russian soil would not be tolerated. Later on the 21st of August, Ukraine confirmed that it had used the US-supplied HIMARS during its attacks on Russian bridges over the Seine River in Kursk. This marked a change in Biden's policy, which had previously refused to allow Ukraine's use of US-supplied weapons in Russia. In April, Biden signed off on military support to Ukraine worth almost $61 billion, of which about $23 billion is being used to replenish military stockpiles, and $14 billion goes to the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, through which the U.S. government will purchase weapons systems from U.S. defense contractors for Ukraine. It is also believed that German-supplied weapons have been used in the Kursk Incursion. Germany is one of the largest supplier of weapons to Ukraine, second only to the U.S. It supplies Marder infantry fighting vehicles, Leopard battle tanks, air defense systems, drones and rocket launch systems to Kyiv. There are now credible reports that British Challenger tanks have been used by Ukraine forces in Kursk. UK media, including Sky News and the BBC, published speculation on August 15 that Ukraine had used British Challenger 2 tanks on Russian territory.